Welcome to another episode of Video Game Reviews. Today I'm going to be talking about Infernax on the Nintendo Switch. And look, I'm definitely going to go into more detail here, but I can sum up my review in 2 words. Buy it. For those of you who want a little more info, however, or if you just want to listen to someone talk about a good neo-retro game for a few minutes, let's dive in. The developers have reportedly been working on this game for 11 years. So I guess originally Infernax was a Flash game which was developed in 2011, and evidently since then they've been working on basically porting that to more of an 8-bit console type of experience. Okay, so they've been working on the game for a really long time, and although a single playthrough isn't all that long, you know, their effort definitely shows in the quality of this game, or at least I think so. The controls in Infernax are buttery smooth. There is 0 unintentional input delay. And if you don't know, an input delay, that's just the time between when you press a button and the corresponding response happens on the screen. I seem to see kind of a lot of what I would call sort of a micro delay in games these days. Like, it's pretty common, and most of the time it's not enough to really be a problem, but in most cases I do find it noticeable, and I didn't notice any of that going on with Infernax, and it feels great. It's a joy to control. In fact, I would say it's one of the best examples of tight controls in recent memory, and it's probably my favorite 2D pixel art platform action game since the first Curse of the Moon. So if you can't tell, I'm pretty impressed with Infernax. Although not everything is glowingly positive. I mean, it's not flawless, whatever that even means. I mean, to a large degree, that's subjective anyways, right? Though Infernax is not a straightforward linear action game, you know, like in Curse of the Moon, it's level 1, level 2, level 3, but it's also not a true Metroidvania. It actually has the most in common, I would say, with Simon's Quest, which, while technically kind of is a Metroidvania, it's more of a slight variation on that genre, I would say, and I've heard a lot of people kind of say the same thing about Simon's Quest, and that is partly owing to the relative lack of vertical chambers on the map in Simon's Quest, and also here in Infernax. You know, look, that may seem like a minor difference, but it actually gives the game a distinctly different feel. And so that's what you're looking at here as well. But let's get back to Infernax. To put it the most concisely that I can really come up with, if Curse of the Moon is in some ways a refinement on some aspects of Castlevania 3, then I would say Infernax is in some ways a refinement of Castlevania 2, Simon's Quest. Like Simon's Quest, Infernax features multiple endings, but Infernax has quite a few more than Simon's Quest had. Infernax has a whopping 7, I believe. Although the game remains relatively unchanged in terms of the map, at least, that you're traversing. That's almost exactly the same regardless of how you play through the game. There are still a lot of different ways to play through it, and most of those differences are related to a morality system, which is, again, different people will have different opinions about this, but I think it's unfortunate that the morality system is invisible to the player. So, in other words, it's not like Fable or Knights of the Old Republic, just as 2 examples, where you know exactly where you stand on the morality meter. Here the game gives you no indication of how your choices have affected the character's morality, and thus how you've ultimately affected your playthrough. The morality meter in Infernax is mostly dependent on how the player responds to choices that they're given. And you should see some examples of those in little cutscene type segments that you'll see throughout this video. Sometimes I found it difficult to tell, even after having made a choice, if I made a good or evil decision, because the decisions that you're asked to make often fall into a gray moral area. Like, none of the options are really all good or all bad. You can kind of see the potential for both in a lot of the choices. Oh, and often that is due to the fact that you aren't given any background context into the choices that you're being asked to make. You sort of stumble upon a scene and you're asked to make like a split-second decision right there on the spot. It's not something that you can come back to and decide later, and yet there's no way to know the details that would really help you to discern which is the good choice and which is the evil choice. Although I do think this was intentional by the developer. You know, like, you're just sort of thrust into these situations, and maybe you don't have all the info you need, but you have to make the best decision with the limited info that you have. So in that sense, it's sort of applicable to real life, I would say. You know, you just make the best decision that you can, and you hope for a positive outcome, but, you know, unfortunately, sometimes you have to make choices without fully understanding the scope of the decision that you're making. That's just how things go sometimes. So in a sense, it's kind of realistic. And because of that, I had no regrets on my first playthrough, because I was at peace with the choices that I made, given the circumstances, given the fact that, like, I couldn't have made a different choice or a better choice, because I did what I could with what I had to work with, essentially. However, this vagueness surrounding the decisions that you make means that most people, myself included, will probably need to look at a guide during subsequent playthroughs where you're, you know, if you want to, like, go back and achieve specific endings, it would be very hard to know what to do to not screw up your chances at getting a particular ending. It's just not very clear. So as long as you can just play through the game however you want to play through the game the first time, and just be at peace with the ending that you get, then, which I got the good ending. So there's like the good ending and then the very good ending, which pretty much you're probably going to have to look at a guide to get that, or at least I certainly did. Anyways, moving along. In Infernax, there are also different playable characters that you can unlock depending on what you enter your name as at the beginning of the save. Like, at the beginning of the save file, whenever you first start a new game, you know, and you put in your character's name, there are different names that you can put in to get different playable characters. And you can find out these different names. You know, you can go about that by either looking online, of course, or if you want to do it old school, you can do it by collecting books in the game, which you receive according to the ending that you got. So, like, you get an ending and it gives you a book related to that ending, which not always, but oftentimes will give you a character name that you can input and then play as a different character. Hopefully that description made sense. You can even unlock a machine gun toting Contra ripoff character. So I thought that was kind of cool in the sense that, like, you know, this game is obviously inspired by Castlevania, so Konami, you know, and then they threw in Konami's other enormous old school franchise being Contra. They threw in a little nod to that. I thought that was, you know, that was kind of nice. Is the machine gun character way overpowered? Yeah, probably. But they're a lot of fun to run through the game with, once you've already seen the whole thing and played it as it, quote unquote, as it was intended. Playing through as a Contra character really is a worthwhile second playthrough, I feel like. But there are a number of other characters. There's Jason Voorhees and some other characters that you can unlock to help you kind of switch things up. So that adds a lot of value. Anyways, look, to sum it up, if you like Simon's Quest, get Infernax. Or even if you wish you liked Simon's Quest, but you just can't. You just had some problems with it. You wish that they did some things differently, then you still might like Infernax. It's just a really solid old school game. As you can see, Infernax has a great art style, which is very reminiscent of the NES. It also features solid, fitting sound effects that fit along nicely with the presentation style that they've chosen, and chiptunes. The chiptunes in this range anywhere from like, okay, forgettable to pretty darned awesome. I particularly like the music in the soldiers' barracks. It's a short, simple, somewhat repetitive loop of chiptunes, like a nice slow groove kind of, and in that way it's kind of reminiscent, for me at least, of the town music from Simon's Quest, which happens to be one of my favorite chiptunes of all time, and which I featured a few seconds of at the end of my top 20 Switch games video, so check that out if you haven't already. Anyways, Infernax sells for $20 on the eShop. Although it does occasionally go on sale, I got it for $15, but honestly, it's worth the full $20. If you're looking for what is essentially one of the best NES games that was never on the NES, this game is totally worth it. So look guys, that's about it. If you like the show and want to see more, I hope you'll consider subscribing. I'd like to give a big thanks to all 71 of my subscribers, and also to really just everybody who watches my little show here. All right, I'll see you guys next time, whenever that may be. Bye-bye.